The Las Vegas expansion draft is officially over, and they ended up taking Calvin Pickard from the Avalanche. While losing Pickard is disappointing, the fact is the Avs are going to lose a roster player no matter what. One of Pickard, Grigorenko, and Barberio were getting picked for sure. And really, Barberio wasn't very likely to get picked. In hindsight, we can see that Vegas picked 15 defensemen, and they didn't manage to go for Barberio. With Pickard available, there was really no chance of Barberio ever getting picked. So the question then surrounding the draft is, why was Grigorenko exposed? Did the Avalanche try and expose him to make a deal to protect Pickard? Was Grigorenko exposed simply because he wasn't liked around the organization? Did they really think Como was worth protecting over Grigorenko? It's really confusing, and likely that we'll never know unless the Avs actually want to tell us what was going on there. Me personally, I find it hard to believe that Grigorenko wasn't well liked in Bednar's system, as he was our best depth scorer, and also put up a points per 60 higher than anyone else in our bottom six. Yes, I will admit he did have his lazy moments, and he wasn't always willing to go into the corners and do the dirty work, but you don't need everyone on your team to be able to do that. If he's able to produce and score goals, especially on the third line for the Avalanche, he's a solid depth option. So with that said, it is at least a little bit of a bright spot that we get to keep Grigorenko on the team. I do hope they re-sign him and utilize him well in our bottom six next year, but at absolute minimum, they need to get something for him in a trade, whether that's a mid-round draft pick or maybe a different prospect. I do think he does have value to teams around the league and will be worth something decent. So, with Pickard gone, we do have a hole at our backup goalie slot. Now, I understand protecting Varlamov. He's been our starter for the past 3 years, despite his injuries. Hopefully his surgery can recover his leg and he can be our permanent starter for the foreseeable future. It's also possible that we could at least turn losing Pickard into an opportunity. Someone like Dallas, who has two highly paid goalies in Lettinen and Niemi wrapped up on contracts through next year, might be looking to offload those contracts, and maybe we can pick up a draft pick in the process. Particularly Niemi looks good, as his contract expires at the end of next year, so it wouldn't affect our cap long term, and maybe we could pick up a 4th or 5th round pick from Dallas to get that done. With the cap officially at $75 million for the 17-18 season, as of the current moment, the Avs now have $21.5 million of space. Granted, they do need to use that to re-sign some players like Zadorov, Grigorenko, and Andrighetto, but it still leaves them plenty of room to take on a contract like Niemi's for draft picks. The backup goalie slot can be filled relatively easily, especially for this next year, which is a year where not much at all is expected out of the Avalanche. The Avalanche do still, however, have the same holes to fill that they had before this expansion draft. That is, forward depth, including a top 6 winger, and defensive depth needs to be sorted out on which prospects are going to make the team, and if we want to make a trade for a legitimate top 4 defenseman somewhere else in the league. Given the position Vegas is in, it would appear that they also see Pickard as a permanent backup goalie in the league and nothing more. They have Marc-Andre Fleury, who's guaranteed to be their starter for the next 2 years at minimum. At that point, Fleury will be 34, which isn't young, but goalies do tend to play well into their late 30s, much longer than most skaters. So it does look good for Pickard to slot in as the backup in Vegas, but it's also possible they could try and flip him. They also took J.F. Berube from the New York Islanders, so he could very well be a serviceable backup for Fleury as well. If they do try to flip one of these goalies, it will be really interesting to see what they can get for them, because then you can kind of quantify what we gave up in giving Pickard to Vegas. With all these holes created in all 30 current teams in the NHL, the trade freeze ends tomorrow, June 22nd, and it looks like a lot of teams will be looking to make moves to try to fill the holes. It would be no surprise if the Avs are significantly involved with that, obviously with all the Matt Duchene rumors flying around, and now these questions surrounding Grigorenko. These next 4 or 5 days will be very telling for the Avalanche. With the trades happening and the draft coming up, it's really going to set the tone coming into this next offseason and where we end up, and then that leads into free agency, which hopefully we aren't too big of a player in, but we might pick up pieces here and there to flush out our roster, and then we'll really get a look at what the Avalanche are going to look like next season. As far as Vegas is concerned, They're not going to be a pushover at all this year. Every team is going to have to earn their wins against them. They have quality veterans such as James Neal and obviously Marc-Andre Fleury going to be their wall in net. And they also picked up some good young talent, including the likes of Marchessault and Riley Smith from the Florida Panthers. On top of this, they also picked up an additional 3 first-round draft picks, including the 15th overall from the New York Islanders, so we can basically kibosh any of the trade rumors to Duchesne going there. And it looks like they are set up very well to build out their team going forward. They are likely to be one of the most active teams as trades continue over the next 3 days, and I'm interested to see if they have any talks with the Avs and what the Avs might be looking for to get out of them. Ultimately, I don't think the Avs were in the top half of teams managing the expansion draft, but I don't think they were one of the worst either. You have teams like Florida, who gave up 2 young talents, really hurt them immediately, and teams like the Islanders, who gave up a stupid amount of picks and players just to protect their unprotected players, which is giving up way too much. It's hard to tell for the Avs. It's possible that over the next 3 years, Pickard completely develops, solves all his problems, and becomes a starting goaltender somewhere in the NHL. It's also possible that Pickard has already peaked, and he's going to be a decent backup goaltender in the NHL. Really, we'll only be able to tell how bad or good this was in hindsight. That is the end of this expansion draft review, part 2, the actual review part. I'm Rudo3, and I'm gonna miss you, Picks.